Hi, everyone. Think your podcast can't break through the noise? Think again. Today, we're diving into how to make your podcast not just heard, but impossible to ignore. With the right SEO strategies, you'll learn how to reach more listeners and build a community that's genuinely engaged. So, we're starting with the secrets to optimizing your podcast for maximum reach. Get ready to take notes. All right, welcome to Talking Business with Ritz, the show that humanizes entrepreneurship. So I'm your host, Ritzel Rectra, and today we're diving into the world of podcasting and SEO with an expert who's all about helping you break through the noise. So get ready to meet the incredible. All right. Let's get ready to meet the incredible Doreen Brown as we showcase the human behind the title before the offer. All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Doreen Brown. I'm putting her on stage right now. Here we go. All right. So Doreen Brown is a seasoned SEO consultant and coach and the founder of Let's Get Visible. So with over 12 years of experience in helping businesses optimize their online presence. So I'm so excited. All right. So Doreen has dedicated her career to making sure female founders, coaches, and consultants get the visibility they deserve. So today, she's here to share how to use podcasting as a powerful tool for boosting your SEO and expanding your reach. So, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Doreen Brown.
Hi, Ritz.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
I am very excited to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Right. So I've been following your work, and I know our audience is going to gain so much from you today when it comes to SEO and visibility. So I know this is going to be a game changer. So now let's get to know the person behind the title. Are you ready, Doreen?
Yes, let's go.
All right, here we go. All right, let's start with the first question. Who is Doreen as a person?
Yes, so I'm, as you mentioned, the founder of my consulting company, which is called Let's Get Visible. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm based in Australia. So I'm just about an hour from Sydney. And I'm not just a business owner and a female founder, but I'm also a mum. So I have 2 kids, 2 cats, 2 dogs, and a husband as well. So life is pretty
Wow.
hectic. Yeah, it's pretty hectic. And obviously, on top of running my consulting business, I also have my podcast, which is Let's Get Visible with Doreen Brown as well, which is very timely because obviously we're on this podcast together and we're talking all things podcasting and SEO. So,
Right. All right. That's thank you for sharing that. All right. Now,
yeah.
can you tell us about how you started as an SEO consultant and coach?
Yeah, so I'll try to make it as short as possible because it's quite a long story. But I spent about 15 years in corporate land. So my
Mhm.
background is in psychology, and I'm also a qualified trainer. And assessor as well. So I spent 15 years in corporate land working in that space. And then after having my second child, I wasn't able to go back to flexible working conditions. And so I decided it would be a great idea whilst I had, my little one who was only a few months old and not sleeping.
Mhm.
So I was completely sleep deprived. I thought, oh, this would be great to start a side hustle and launch my own website. Now, this was back in 2012 when Shopify and Wix and, those platforms did not exist. So I had to learn and teach myself how to code and launch a website, which I did. And I was expecting to have this new online business where I sold, baby products. But when I pressed launch, unfortunately, there were no sales, no one visiting the website, and there were just crickets, like an entire orchestra of crickets. And I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to Google, like, how can I get more traffic, to my website? Because the only people visiting my website at the time were family and friends that I was begging to come and have a look at my products and services and things like that. So that's when I came across the term SEO, and I thought, what on earth is SEO? And that's when I learned it was all about search engine optimization, and that pressing launch wasn't actually enough to get your business and brand in front of,
Indeed, indeed.
your users and eyeballs. And so, I ended up landing an entry level position with a digital marketing agency in Sydney a few months
Mm-hmm.
later. And it was actually the building of that website and putting all of the content and images and all the things together that I taught myself, plus obviously my background and my experience, that got me
Mm-hmm.
into that position to begin with.
Wow.
And then 5 years working at the agency, I made my way up through, to be a team leader and all those kinds of things. But unfortunately, the agency closed down in 2017. So I literally went to work on the Friday and was employed. And by Monday morning, I was now out of a job. And I thought, well, I don't want to go back to working for someone else again. I definitely want to launch my own business. And that's when the business that I have now, which is Let's Get Visible, was born. And it's been 7 years in the making, so in the process. Yeah.
Wow. Very interesting and very inspiring. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
All right. Now, it's time for the lightning rounds of question. Are you ready, Doreen?
I'm ready.
All right. Here we go. So, first question: what is your favorite word and why?
Possible is my favorite word, because I just believe anything you set your mind to and anything that you want to do is possible. And yes, it just holds so many different, opportunities for you when you have the mindset that anything is possible.
All right.
Yeah.
That's great to know. Now, second question: pizza or sushi?
Sushi, because I'm gluten free, so I can't eat pizza.
Uh oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Beach or mountain?
Oh, I live near the beach and the mountains, so that's a really tricky one. But I would definitely say beach because I love the water. Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, summer or winter?
Summer, most
Summer,
definitely
of course.
summer. Yeah.
All right. Coffee or tea?
I can't have caffeine either, so I have to go with decaffeinated tea.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
All right. Early bird or night owl?
Night owl. Definitely a night owl. I'm not a morning person. Don't contact me early in the morning because I'm not coherent.
All right. Good to know. Now, what's one thing most people don't know about you?
Um, One thing they don't know about me, probably that I used to play the drums in a heavy metal band when I was quite younger. Yeah, so we used to do Metallica covers
Wow.
way back in the 90s, and yes, so I used to play the drums.
Wow.
Yeah,
This is a complete
complete.
360. Wow. All
Yeah.
right. In three words, how would your friends describe you?
Oh, passionate, kind,
Mhm.
and generous. Yeah, I
All right.
always have an open door.
Wow. All right. Now, what advice would you give your younger self? Say you're talking to her now.
I've done this a couple of times actually. In a therapy setting, and if
Ah,
I was talking to my younger self, definitely to let her know that again, anything is possible. And at the time, you might feel like you don't have enough experience or knowledge or things like that, but with
mhm.
time you will definitely develop and grow into the person that you are meant to be, and you will be where you need to be in time. But it's definitely not a race to get there as well, so enjoy the ride.
Right. So it's
Yeah,
the journey, right?
it is yeah.
All right. Thanks, Doreen, for being so open and candid with us.
You're
It's
welcome.
great. It's been great getting to know you better.
Thank you.
All right, now to our audience, if you're enjoying this, please like and subscribe to our channel. And for everyone joining us live, keep sending in those questions for our Q&A session. All right, now let's get to the part we've all been waiting for. It's the Learn from the Expert segment. Doreen will be talking about three topics where she will share tips and strategies for making your podcast stand out online. All right, now let's jump right in. All right, welcome back, amazing Bam Bams. Doreen's story is just the beginning. Now it's time for the strategies that can transform your podcast. We all want our podcast to reach more ears, but how do we do it? Now let's start with our first topic. The first topic is SEO secrets, how to optimize your podcast for maximum reach. So, Doreen, now let's start with the basics.
Yes.
What role does SEO play in podcasting and why is it so important?
It's absolutely huge. So before you even start recording, pressing that record button, bringing in your guests or maybe doing a solo episode, you need to think about the strategy behind the
Mhm,
content you're creating, because essentially
mhm,
podcasting is just another form of content. So instead of it being a blog or instead of it being a social media post, you're having a conversation, a real conversation, either with a guest or again, you're doing that solo, episode and having that conversation, obviously, with your audience. So you need to think about the purpose and the intention behind what you're doing, and how does that relate and connect to your business goals. Okay, so if you're going to record a podcast about an episode like SEO and podcasting, how does this actually connect to the bigger picture and to the strategy that you have when it comes to your marketing and obviously building your online visibility? So,
mhm,
one of the secrets or one of the tips that I would share is that before you even start recording, is to actually sit down and have a look at the things that you're wanting to increase visibility in. And when you're creating the podcasts and you're reaching out to different guests in order to be on your show or again doing solo episodes, you're thinking about the types of topics that you're doing very strategically, so that you can also connect those back to the types of services that you offer. So one of the SEO secrets or tips again that I can share is that when I'm creating my solo episodes, I'm doing
mhm,
that specifically so that I can also create video content for my landing pages, and I can create, content for pages where, people are basically jumping on there from, let's say, another existing page on the website and landing
mhm,
on this specific page. You can repurpose the content that you're creating in podcasting to also live on your website pages. And a lot of people I know, have amazing podcasts, but they're really not leveraging their own website when it comes to their podcast episodes. They're just thinking of it in form of a silo rather than thinking of it as a bigger picture. But because you can utilize podcasts and the content created from that in so many different ways,
mhm.
again, you really need to think about the purpose and intention behind every single episode, and how does this connect back to your bigger goal when it comes to your marketing and your visibility as well.
Interesting, interesting. I
Yeah,
haven't got my any blog or something on my website.
there you
I haven't
go.
got really a proper website yet, actually.
There you go. There you go. So that's a really big opportunity that is just awaiting for you, right? Because,
Right.
things like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all of those different podcasting platforms, they're amazing and they're awesome because they've got their own built in SEO. Right. So,
Mm,
because there are so many users on those platforms, what we're basically doing is leveraging those platforms' SEO and also the way that they use AI to be able to recommend shows and do all of those kinds of things. So there's AI amplification already built in. But one
mm,
of the missed opportunities is that podcasters like you and I really need to think about it from a long-term perspective as well, because these recordings, unless you physically delete them, they're not going anywhere. They're evergreen as well. So instead of writing boring how-to blogs, which are completely saturated, Google themselves have said that we want unique, authentic content in order to increase your
Exactly.
visibility online. Now, the
Right.
best way to do that is to have these conversations, because the conversation we're having today is not something that we've just typed into ChatGPT. They're authentic and real conversations. And that's actually what Google is looking for from a search engine perspective, is it's looking for content, created by experts that is going to give online users the information that they need when they're doing that all important Google search. So if we're just giving them the same old how to blogs and really boring, landing pages, then Google themselves are not going to present us in those organic search results, because they're looking for real, authentic, quality content from experts that, are providing that information.
Right, right. So I'm supposed to ask you. So once you have a solid understanding of SEO, right? Now,
Yes.
what's the first step of a podcaster? What should they take first? I mean, what should they do first to optimize their
Yes.
content? Aside from what you said earlier.
Yeah. So definitely having a look at things like your podcast titles. So very similar to what you've done with this interview today, is that you've incorporated keywords like SEO and podcasting, so that if someone was to do a search on those two topics, that you would be one of the actual podcast shows that would pop up for those specific things.
Great, I
So
did well.
really, yeah, you did really well. So really having a think about the titles of your topics and the titles of your podcasting episodes. I know when I first started, I was doing small business talk with, somebody's name. And then I began to realize, no, people are actually Googling and searching for specific topics. Let me
Mhm.
leverage that Google search within the topics that I'm creating. So making sure that, yeah, you're not putting any boring titles in, and that you're optimizing them for the keywords relevant to the topic that you're discussing in that podcast episode.
Mhm.
The next thing we want to do is make sure that we're using our show notes effectively. So we're not just like copying and pasting, again, irrelevant things. We're looking at keywords within our show notes and making sure that we're sprinkling them throughout the show notes as well, because they can also help with visibility. You also have the opportunity to add links within your show notes, so you can actually direct people to different pages of your website. If you've got a guest, for example, then their website, might be included in those show notes and in those links. So be very, very mindful again of the content that you're creating and pairing up with your podcast episode. The keywords again are super important, because that's what people are actually typing into the different search fields in order to
Mhm.
find your show or find your episode as well.
All right. So, what you're saying is, when they key in words, either in Google or any type of search engine, right?
Yes,
Whatever you put in the title or in the description or show notes,
hmm
that's gonna come out. Is that?
that's right. That's what you want to get
Oh,
visible for. So it's really, when it comes to SEO, it's very logical. I know that it's overcomplicated and sometimes it can sound
yeah.
quite scary, pardon me, but it's really not that scary. It comes down to common sense and logic. So you really have to think about it from a user perspective. And I mean, myself and yourself too, Ritz, we're both online users. We're both people that use the
Mhm.
internet in order to do our own research. So
Yeah.
place yourself in your audience's shoes and think, okay, if they were trying to search for something and trying to find me, what are the types of things that they would be typing into those different search engines, and how can I marry that up with the information and keywords and titles and words within my show notes, so
Right.
that it's actually marrying those two things together. And essentially that's what SEO is. It's driving online users to find you, based on the fact obviously that you're creating something authentic and it's of quality as well. Yeah.
Right. Right. But probably the next question is, say, okay, you put in all those keywords in your title and in your show notes,
Mhm.
um, but you're still not seeing anything yet, you know.
Yes.
So, mm,
Yeah, it's important to leverage different arms or different channels when it comes to podcasting. So we can't think of podcasting as just, I'm going to publish this episode, it's going to be on all the major platforms, and that's it. Okay, we have to think about what other things can we use in order to maximize visibility for our podcasts. And one of the ways in which we've mentioned this, previously, is that we want to set up our podcast on our website. So on
mm,
my website, if anyone wants to go and have a bit of a sticky beak and look at the way that I do it, I actually have a separate section on my website for podcasts, and
oh,
every single episode has its own designated page. So I don't just have a library of podcasts that live on one page. I actually create individual episodes on individual website pages, so then I can
mhm,
specifically optimize that page for that topic that we're discussing in that podcast episode. So this comes down to your URL for that page, which can be
mhm,
optimized. Again, the content that lives on the page. You can also embed videos onto the page. You can have your script. So you can actually have a script of what the two people, are having the
okay,
conversation
yeah,
about. That can
mhm,
be on there. You can
mhm,
have key takeaways, on that page. So you can really build it out to be a visibility machine for you if you want to. If, again, you think about it strategically and not just in the form of it being, again, published on, podcast platforms, but actually utilizing other tools like your website in order to do that. Another great way to really expand visibility for your podcast is
mhm,
YouTube. So YouTube is the second largest search engine that we have, other than Google, right? So
right,
being able to create content like we're doing right now, where we have both video and audio, and we're able to then, publish this as a YouTube video. And we can then further optimize it with our transcript, our show notes, our titles, our keywords, our tags. There's lots of different things that you can do on YouTube as well in order to drive more people to your podcast and obviously to build that audience. Another great strategy to use, which is something that you're doing right now, is
mhm,
inviting guests to be on your show.
mm,
So being able to, tap into other people's audiences, or OPA, we like to call it, is being able to expand your reach beyond your own people. Okay, so people
right,
that would have never have heard of you before will now hear about you because I will be sharing this podcast to my audience.
mhm,
Your audience is obviously going to now be aware of who I am because you've invited me on as your guest. And so now
exactly,
we can now both leverage both of our audiences. And if we do that multiple times, all we're doing is building a bigger and bigger pool of people that we would have not had access to had we not been guests on other people's podcasts or had guests on our podcasts as well. So when you're
mhm,
thinking about launching a podcast, part of your strategy should definitely be to have guests on your podcast, but to also feature
YouTube,
yourself and get yourself on other people's podcasts as well, because all we're doing is we're basically sharing the knowledge, sharing the information, but we're also sharing our audiences for each other as well.
yeah, exactly. That is a great insights on SEO, Doreen.
Yeah.
And all right, so now let's talk about something just as crucial, which is building a strong connection with your audience. So now
Yes.
let's shift to the next topic, which is community connection, the key to expanding your podcast reach. So, how does engaging with your community actually help expand your podcast reach aside from what we've really already talked about?
Yeah. So, one of the other ways to really create that community connection is making sure that you're sharing your podcasts on platforms like Instagram,
Mhm.
Facebook, LinkedIn, anywhere where you've basically got a community. You want people to be able to exactly, see or hear about your podcasts and tap into your community that way as well. So with this podcast, for example, we've got nearly, 60 minutes worth of video content, right,
Yeah,
that we
true,
can
true,
share. So
true.
when it comes to thinking about your strategy to build that community, we have got probably close to 15 different snippets or segments that we can create as reels, we can create as static posts, and then we can engage with our community and basically get them to comment or ask questions or those kinds of things, and make sure that we respond to them either through our DMs, or if they're, creating those questions or comments on our pages themselves, that we are actually engaging with them. Because most of the time you will find that podcasts, there's something that bring content out into like almost like a 3D version. So when you think
Right.
about written content, it's very flat, it's very one dimensional. But when you're, watching a video or you're hearing a conversation, you can actually feel that person, you can hear that person. So you're building a connection with someone and building that rapport, because it's a different form of communication. And
Mm,
people connect with people, right? They're not connecting with the actual service or the product, they're connecting with the
right,
person behind the product, the human that
right.
exists who's created the product. And so again, it's really important that you're asking, people to engage, ask you questions about it. I know when I use Spotify as my main platform for my podcast, there's actually now
Mhm.
an option to have people ask questions. So once they've listened to your podcast episode, and I've now changed to video podcasting, so all of my podcasts are now video, and you actually have the opportunity to get people to engage on Spotify itself by having like a Q&A section. So people can actually ask you questions once they've had a listen to your podcast as well. So the key tip is making sure you're leveraging all of their different opportunities like social media, but also within the podcast channels themselves, because they're constantly upgrading and changing to trying to build more connection with their audience, right? Because they want more people
Right.
staying on their platforms as well. So they're constantly integrating new updates and new changes. So being mindful and being aware of all the progress and changes that are being made in the podcast world, because they're definitely happening, and you need to, jump on top of them. Like, you can't just sit back and go, oh, I might do that next time. You have to really take the plunge, and say, okay, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to see how it goes. And again, that's another great way to be able to build, that community connection, and again, expand your podcast reach. Because if someone really loves listening to your podcast show,
Mhm.
guess what? They're going to tell their friends. They're going to tell their family. I had a friend recently who, has been listening to the show, and she's like, "Oh, I've got my husband listening to you. My son is listening to you. Like, they're driving in the car on long trips, and everyone's like going, oh my goodness, like I need to listen to, the latest episode."
Right.
So it's, yeah, definitely, putting yourself out there, but just making sure you're leveraging all of those different opportunities from that one piece of content as well.
All right. So you've answered all the questions that I'm going to answer. And one of them is that how can podcaster really create value for their community to keep them, keep them engaged? So
Yeah.
aside from what you've already mentioned, what else can you
Yeah,
add?
so understanding your audience, I think, is the most important thing, right? And we did touch on this a
Right.
little bit, but I think in this sort of time, we're all
Mhm,
thinking
mhm.
about artificial intelligence and how can
Oh
we
yeah,
automate
it's very
things.
rampant. Yeah.
It is rampant, right? And like, we just want to automate everything. We want to put everything on autopilot. But I'm from the old school, right? I grew up, like, I was
Me
born
too.
in the 70s. Yeah, I was born in the 70s, and I'm used to growing up like with old fashioned, I guess, old ways of doing business and,
Right.
again, building connection. And so I really encourage people to go, okay, yes, AI has its place and
Mhm.
automation has its place, but don't
Right.
forget, again, that humans want to connect with other humans. They don't want to connect with a robot. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so it's really important when you're thinking about even the types of topics that you're going to discuss, that you understand your audience, understand what they're thinking, understand what they're feeling. If I do talk about this topic, what kind of reaction is this going to yield? Because obviously we want to increase visibility, but we also want to increase people taking action. So if we're talking about something just because we like talking about it, but it's
Right.
not something that's going to resonate with our audience, then we're not really creating that connection. We're just talking about something that we love to talk about because it might be a hobby, or it could be about your kids or your pets
Right.
or whatever it is.
Right.
But like, do you understand your audience, and do you understand what it is that they need to make them think, to make them feel, and then to make them take action? So really taking a step back from AI and automation and actually speaking to people within your audience, connecting, having a real conversation and saying, how do you feel about the topics? How do you feel about the show? Is there anything you would like me to include, in this next season? And actually like speak about it, rather than again trying to press the automation button and just let everything go on autopilot. Be involved in your business, be involved in your episodes, and actually have a purpose behind what you're doing, and don't just do it because everyone else is doing it. There
Yeah,
has to be
exactly.
a reason for you doing what you're doing. You need to be passionate about it, or it's just not going to be a long-term thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like this platform of mine, I
Yeah.
created it because I really want to humanize entrepreneurship. Because when they say entrepreneurs, oh, they just, the boss and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
they're not human at
Exactly. And people actually don't connect with that. So when they can see
all.
and hear that you're a real person, you go through real life things, and you're not just this perfectly, structured thing all the time. You do have good
Right.
days, you have bad days. You openly
Exactly.
speak about that because we all do. We're all human. Yes, we run businesses, and yes, we're entrepreneurs, but we still have to do life as well. And we kind of
Correct.
sometimes do it on a whole other level, because when you work for someone else, that's one thing. But when you work for yourself, you work even harder and you work even
Exactly.
longer, right?
Right. Because
Right?
you are everything
You're
in your
everything.
business.
Correct. Correct.
Right.
So, and I think it's important that people see, that side of things too. And, in my
Mhm.
podcast show, the purpose of it is to show people that business is not all unicorns and rainbows. We actually have real difficult conversations with my guests, and we talk about the things that they've had to go through in order
Mhm.
to still succeed in business. And sometimes, people share some really, heart wrenching like stories and information, but the people who are listening are like, wow, they're real people. They're actually going through the same things that I'm going through. And maybe
Right.
that will help someone. That conversation will help that person feel less lonely, less isolated, because they are like, okay, there's other people out here that are going through the exact same thing, that I am
Exactly.
as well.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Right. All
Yeah.
right. All right. Okay. Now we've covered how to build your community, right? But let's face it, managing a podcast can be a lot of work. It is a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
work. So let's now shift to the next topic.
Sure.
All right. Here we go. Efficiency matters, tools to simplify your podcasting process. Take note, not AI, but to simplify or to
Yes.
streamline. Okay, so Doreen,
Yes.
what tools do you recommend making the process more efficient?
Yeah. So I'm a very simple person. I don't like to overcomplicate any process, because the more
Mhm.
complicated it is and the more technical it is, the more things can go wrong. So when
Yeah,
it comes to simplifying your podcasting process, I really only use three tools when I do my podcasts. The first tool is Zoom, good old Zoom, record your video, record your audio on Zoom. The second is iMovie to do all of my editing and
right.
producing. And then my
Mm-hmm.
third one is Riverside. So that's the one I like to use for my branding. And I like to use that one for my captions as well. And it also provides me with some keywords I can use, some show notes that I can use. So I'm really simplifying the process, because we know that pressing record and recording an episode is just one part of quite a big process, right? There's
Right.
the initial process of, like, connecting with other people, booking them on your show, scheduling your time, getting them
Right.
obviously to show up. Fingers crossed that they do actually show up to the interview. Then you've got, the production side of things, your editing, you're producing, you're publishing, you're doing all of those things. So to be efficient, my recommendation would be to keep it simple and don't overcomplicate the process. Right. So you don't need to go and hire a podcast studio. You don't need to go and get the latest microphone. I use a $65 tool headset from Amazon. This is what I record everything on, whether it's podcasts, whether it's training videos, client meetings. Literally, this headset does it all because I can hear the noise. I can, obviously people can hear me using the microphone, and it's just a simple thing. I plug in, chuck it on, and it's just simple and it's done. So don't overcomplicate it. You don't need fancy DJ like boxes where it like amplifies this and does all of that. Honestly, you don't need that. So just keeping it simple and making sure you plan. So as mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, have a strategy in mind. Like, don't rock up to a podcast without knowing what you're going to discuss and what you're going to talk
Mhm.
about, because you will sit at your desk for hours and hours re-recording and re-recording if you are not prepared for the episode that you are about to record.
Exactly.
Yeah. And quite a few clients, have said that, like, oh, I get to my, Zoom room and my microphone's on, and then I freeze because I don't know what to talk about. And I'm like, did you create the strategy? Did you find out what your audience wants you to actually talk about? Have you created a bit of a script around that? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you need to
Mhm.
be prepared. So keep it simple, have a strategy, and be prepared is probably the best way that I have found to be efficient when it comes to podcasting. Because yes, as you said, it's not just pressing record. There's so many different elements to it that, we need to do as well.
Right. Right. Been there, done that.
Been there,
At
done
the
that.
beginning is like that.
It is. It is. And I go back and I'm horrified when I listen to my first season
Oh.
back in 2020. I launched my podcast during the pandemic, and I go back and I've listened to the first few episodes, and I'm just like, I've just grown and learned so much from, 4 years ago, and the things that I would kind of ramble about. And now I just think, oh gosh, there's no way I would have recorded that now. But
Mhm.
that's the beauty of hindsight, right? Is that you can look back on the beginning and go, okay, I've learned from that, and definitely grown, and can see the best way to do things now.
Yes, it becomes our inspiration.
It does. Yeah, I love that. It does. It does become inspiration. Yeah.
All right. Now, Doreen, what are some common challenges podcaster faces when trying to streamline their process, and how can they actually overcome them?
Yeah, I think it's more to do with overwhelm. And I
Mhm.
think we tend to get into our own minds sometimes, especially if we're solo entrepreneurs. We
Right.
don't have a big team and all those kinds of things. So I think it's just, again, being really plan everything out, make sure you have a structure for it, so that, again, you can really maintain that simplicity and that efficiency, and just making sure that you're reducing the overwhelm. So don't look
Mhm.
at the mountain that kind of lies ahead. Just take it one episode at a time, and
Right.
don't set expectations that are, again, like really, really high, because as with all things, right? Like, there's a lot of
Right.
people obviously in podcasting, there's lots of businesses, there's lots of websites, there's lots of social media platforms, there's lots of everything in 2024. But you just have to take it one day and one step at a time, but making sure you're planning for it as best as you can to try and reduce that overwhelm, and to reduce the result of, going to your desk and just feeling like, oh, I don't really know what it is I'm going to talk about in this episode. So making sure you're planning for it as well.
Right, right. It does get overwhelming at times,
Yes.
So even now, especially when I'm not that familiar with the topic that my guest is going to talk about, right? I have to like research, I have to read about it, you know,
Yes.
then come up with questions that will definitely relate to what the topics are about,
Correct.
right?
Yes. And I think it's important too, though, to make the conversation just flow and just be as natural as
Mhm.
possible. I think sometimes planning is definitely great. And as you've done with this episode, you've had, your questions pre-planned and those kinds of things,
Right.
which is great. But sometimes what I find when I'm interviewing other people on my podcast show is that they might say something that will lead us down a different path, and take the conversation on a different angle, as well. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to obviously just let the natural conversation flow
Mhm.
if it's going
Yeah.
in a different direction as well.
Right, right. That is so true.
Yeah.
Okay, now, what advice would you give to podcasters who are looking to optimize their workflow but don't know where to start?
Okay. So again, it comes down to strategy. I think if you're trying to launch anything or have a podcast and not have a strategy behind it, that's when you're going to feel overwhelmed. That's when you're going to feel a bit confused. You don't know where things are heading. You need to plan and have a strategy. So understand why you're doing what you're doing. What's the purpose? What's the intention? And what's the outcome that you're looking to get out of doing this? Because it's very time consuming. And you don't want to invest all this time, into something that is not going to leverage or yield an outcome. So,
Right.
yeah, don't go into it without a plan or without a strategy. Definitely, if you're unsure how to create a podcast strategy, then obviously to reach out to someone like me, who can actually sit down with you. And that's what I do, right? I work with my clients to look at their overall search engine optimization strategy, and one of the things that we're doing is podcasting, because podcasting is a great way to generate and create content that can be used on multiple platforms for search engine optimization. So speaking to someone or getting some support and getting some help. Don't sit there sort of drowning in it on your own. Make sure you're
Mm-hmm.
reaching out to other business owners or your friends or someone that can provide you with that support. Because I think that's the other thing, is that we get into our own minds, particularly if we're solo business owners. And it's important to reach out to other people and get that help and support as well.
All right. Thank you. And that wraps up our Learn from the Expert segment. We have a fantastic live expert interview today. Thank you, Doreen. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Continue with the Q&A segment for the follow-up questions. Here we go. All right, let me flash the questions. Here's the first question. I'm just starting out. How can I balance building a community and focusing on content creation?
Yeah. So I think the first part of this is really about, again, creating content that your audience wants and needs.
Mm,
So having a chat to people who are in your, desired audience and actually asking them the questions so that you're creating content that is going to help you build the community. I don't think it's the other way around. I think you need to create the content in order to have the community, because without the
mhm.
content, it's very difficult, obviously, to create that community and that connection. So really reaching out to people and asking them questions, as I said before, old school way of doing business, actually talking to people, reaching out to them, maybe doing little mini like interview sessions to kind of see the type of content that's going to be helpful to them. Otherwise, we're just creating for the sake of creating, and we're not really doing that again with a purpose, or an intention. So content comes before building community, because you have to have the content in order to build the community.
All right, now I think this one. How can I get more people in my community to share my podcast with their networks?
The best way is, again, to have people on as your guest. So when you have guests onto your podcast, then they've obviously got their own network and their own community of people that are going to hear you, and they're going to be introduced to you and your services, and obviously your business as well. So tapping into other people's audiences by being a guest on other people's shows, as well as having guests on your shows. Even if you're doing, like more of a solo kind of podcast, think about doing
Mm-hmm.
different seasons. So I know with my podcast, I'm alternating now my season. So one season will be an interview season followed up by a solo season. So that way, again, I'm still leveraging other people's audiences, but I'm also nurturing my own community and my own audience by still being on topic with my solo episodes as well. So coming up with a structure that's really going to tap into other people's communities and their networks.
All right, take note of that, our listeners. So, what's the first thing? There's the next question. I know we've talked about automation earlier, but what's the first thing we should automate to save time in podcasting?
So I think, yeah, one of the crucial things or critical things that I do to automate time to save time in podcasting is definitely using a platform like Riverside. So when you upload your video to Riverside, it will automatically create a transcript for you. It will automatically create show notes for you. It'll give you the tags that you should use to promote your podcast, and it will also give you other like components of it, like possible headings or titles for the podcast episode. So it's packed with lots of different, bits of information that you can
Right,
leverage without you having to manually type things out or do that research. So once you've recorded the podcast episode, use a platform similar or like Riverside that will actually auto generate a lot of that, heavy sort of lifting stuff once you've,
right,
produced
right.
the episode. Yep.
All right. Thank you for sharing that one. Now, next question would
Okay.
be, what's a common SEO mistake that they can actually, easily fix?
Definitely their podcast titles. That's the one thing that I see over and over again is they're not really thinking about keywords when it comes to the podcast episode title. And that really is an easy fix, right? Because you just again have to think about, okay, what is currently trending at the moment? Even doing your research before you record the podcast. So jumping onto a platform like Google, actually typing in like what are the common things that people are asking about SEO, for example,
Right,
and
right,
then looking at those results and creating content based on what people want to hear or want to learn about that particular topic, and making sure that your podcast titles are relevant to that with those keywords.
right. What can you say about, speaking of topics, right? Sometimes
Yep.
I see hashtag in the topic. Do you recommend that?
It depends on where hashtag is being used. So if it's being used on YouTube, great. If it's being used on Instagram, great. I don't think hashtags do much on the actual podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple. I don't
Mm-hmm.
see
Mm-hmm.
hashtags being used on those particular platforms, but it depends where you're sharing your podcast.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, now this one. There's a lot of questions, but most of them had already been answered.
sure.
So, how often should I update my podcast's SEO strategy to stay relevant?
With every season, you should basically be revisiting your strategy and making sure again that you're working towards an end goal. Because the thing is that online user behavior changes, there's
Mm-hmm.
different trends. There's different topics. And again, with the pandemic, we saw a lot of searches around health, face masks, all those kinds of things. Now, if you go to look at trending topics now, it's different from what it was 4 years ago, right?
Yes.
Because user behavior changes. So I would recommend that with every season that you produce of your podcast, to definitely
Mhm.
revisit your SEO strategy and make sure that you're still being relevant based on the topics that you're looking to, produce podcasts for.
Right. Okay. So as I have said, we have a lot of questions, but most of them had already been answered in the Learn from the Expert segment.
Yep.
So we're going to wrap up our Q&A from here. And then thank you so much again, Doreen, for answering those questions.
You're
Now
welcome.
let's get on with the next segment.
Yep.
All right, here we go. All right, welcome back, fantastic Bams. So I have a question for you. What is your key takeaway today? So share it in the comments section. So I'm asking our audience right now.
Okay.
All right, now, what really stood out for me is how crucial SEO is for podcast visibility. So Doreen highlighted some practical steps we can all take to optimize our podcast. So from a smart keyword search or smart keyword use to the importance of consistent content updates. So these are strategies I'm definitely going to implement, and I'm going to, plan out my website soon.
Good. Yay.
All right, Doreen, thank you so much for an awesome and informative segment. And now let's shift gears and talk about how our audience can take the next step with you. And could you share your offers and how people can work with you to boost their visibility?
Yeah, I would love to. And thank you for the opportunity again today. Ritz, I've had so much fun. I could talk to you for quite a long time, but we're on a limited time frame here. So, yeah, if people do want to get in touch with me, my website is letsgetvisible.com.au. Again, I am based in Australia, so don't forget the .com.au. And that's, yeah, at the bottom of your screen now as well. So you can get in touch from there. From there, you can also access my online academy. And with the online academy, I actually have a program called POP, or the Power of Podcasting, where I help you launch or leverage your existing podcasts as well and integrate SEO into your strategy. Yeah. So if you need any help with that, again, just visit the website that's on your screen and feel free to get in touch. And I'm also happy to do a 30-minute roadmap and discovery chat free of charge as well, just so that obviously we can connect, get to know each other and see whether it's a good fit based on your needs and what it is that you're trying to do with your visibility as well.
Right. Can they reach you through socials?
Yes, socials as well. So I'm also on Instagram under Let's Get Visible and Facebook, under Doreen Rocks. And you can also get in touch with me on LinkedIn as well. So on quite a few different platforms and YouTube too. So
All right.
quite a few, different places.
So is this Let's Get
That's
Visible?
it, visible.
All
Yeah, just
right.
with one
Type it in.
S.
With
So
one S.
let's get
All right.
visible with one S. Yeah.
Let's edit that. Visible. All right. Right.
Yeah.
Save and let's show it again. There you
Yay.
go. All right. Now to everyone watching or listening today, if you're ready to take the next step with Miss Doreen here, don't hesitate to reach out to her directly and go visit her website below and check out her socials too. So she is available on Instagram and Facebook as well, and on LinkedIn. All right. All right, Doreen, do you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with our audience before we end the show?
Sure. I think the one bit of advice or recommendation I would have is to not give up. I think sometimes we are running the race and we get quite tired and exhausted and we feel like just throwing it in and giving up. But the ones that are successful are the ones that keep on going and keep trying and keep, getting visible. So whatever it is that you're doing, it might be a hard day or a hard week, but just know that there is, sun on the other side of the mountain, and just don't give up. Like keep going and keep trying, because they're the ones that are actually successful, not the ones that give up and just stop trying. So just to continue going even when it feels like things are tough.
All right. Thank you very much, Doreen. The only thing that I'm consistent about being visible is this show.
Great. That's awesome. Keep it up. It's a beautiful show. I love it. I've loved today.
All right. Now, those are the words to live by. Much appreciated, Doreen. Again, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and offers with us today. And we hope to have you on the show once again.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. I've loved it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Doreen Brown. All right, before we go, I want to remind all our listeners and watchers today that we're building a community here, a place to learn, grow, and support each other. So thank you for being a part of it today. And don't forget to subscribe and like this episode and join us next time for more engaging conversation with top experts. So remember, the key to growth is continual learning and adaptation. Keep pushing the boundaries of what you can achieve. So coming up next in Talking Business with Ritz. All right. We'll be talking about 3 ways to manage your social media without overwhelm. So mark your calendar on September 7 at 11 a.m. EST, 8 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Central, and if you are on my side of the world, 11 p.m. All right. So DM me with your questions to include in the Q&A segment. All right. And that wraps up our show for today. The episode of Talking Business with Riz. Thank you all for watching and listening. See you next Saturday. And this is Ritzel, Rectra, and our expert guest, Miss Doreen Brown. Stay safe and healthy as we continue talking business with Ritz. Bye, everybody.